today we're going to talk about the spine and the hips a little bit. I'm not going to get too much into like knees and ankles and stuff like that because most of my patients don't really have issues in that area. And actually I'm going to pull it up on, there's a study that was done and they surveyed, I'm going to show this to you guys so you can sort of see. I just have to put it it was part of my PowerPoint presentation. I don't have it printed out because... but it was a study that was done back in 2017, and I think they sent the survey out to, it was in the thousands. I want to say it was like 8,000 musicians, and only 490 people responded, which was kind of a bummer because this was really good information to collect, but the percentage of musicians having injuries, all of them essentially, I think it was like 90% of them that had responded have had an injury. So again, that is consistent with the figures that are out there, like 80 to 90% of musicians will have an injury at some point in their life. And the goal is to avoid them. And if you do have one, to figure out how to fix it, because you're an athlete. Athletes get injured. It's the same thing. You have to look at yourself as an athlete. So the head was only like 19 people that out of the 490 that responded. Neck was 85, shoulder 130. All right, arm was 12, elbow was 23, which I think is really low actually, because I see a lot more elbows. Hand and wrist was 36, back was 135, abdomen 2, lower extremities was only 12, and other, I don't know what they considered other, was 20. So I'm gonna hold this up and see if you guys can see it. Oh, crud. Why does my Surface do that? That drives me crazy. Oh, God. And there's the actual study. See, technologically challenged. I am beyond technologically challenged. Sorry, guys. Okay. There we go. Can you see it now? So that's kind of like how they rated the people with their injuries, right? So back is actually a pretty popular one, all right? And shoulder and neck are the other ones. I see a lot of wrists though. I see a lot of wrists, a lot of elbows, but posture is the big one. Posture is a huge one. So we're going to talk a little bit about posture today and the trunk, and I'm going to kind of bring up a little slide that you guys have probably all maybe seen before, maybe not, but this is another slide of posture, okay? All right, so we have the good posture, which is your head above your ear, so your ear above your shoulder, above your hip, above your knee, above your ankle, which I know we've talked about before in some of the other videos that I've done, all right? And then you've got all these other funky postures that people go into. You see it all the time. If you just kind of sit back, like when you're hanging out on the streets in London, just sit back and watch people walk and see if you can find any of these positions, all right? Because you will see them. We all kind of go into a certain position, all right? But the problem is that when we're not in that good position of ear over shoulder over hip over knee over ankle, it puts our muscles and our joints at a disadvantage. And the longer we stay in those positions, the more wear and tear we have in our joints and in our soft tissue structures. So it's important to be as in good of alignment as you can away from your instrument, but also at your instrument. So athletes are always working on their body. They're always working on their body when they're not doing their sport. They're constantly, when they're actually not, like if you have a runner or a football player, they are always working on their body outside of their actual game that they're playing or their race that they're doing. So you always just want to consider yourself that you are an athlete. I mean, you spend hours and hours and hours honing in on your craft, and you're using really fine muscles. You're using a lot of postural muscles, a lot of core muscles, a lot of trunk muscles, and a lot of shoulder arm muscles. So you want to keep those in a good alignment as you possibly can. And our instruments just don't like us to be in good positions. So we have to try to be in as good of them as we possibly can when we are at them. So I'm going to talk about the spine today, all right? And Stanley's probably not going to be much help today. even though I brought him in here, I don't think he's going to be all that much help because he's bolted together. But you can sort of see, all right, here's your spine, okay? Here's your spine, and there is a normal curve of your spine. So you can sort of see that, and I actually have a picture of when you go into certain positions, what happens to your spine and how it changes, okay? But your trunk, your trunk has different motions that you can go into. So one of those motions is, you know, flexion, where you come forward. Flexion is always that forward motion, where you come forward. So just kind of reach down and see how far down you can go, all right? And then you can come back up. And then you go backwards and see how far you go. All right, any pain, any pinching, any numbness and tingling in any of those planes, okay? Then you have the old side bend, okay? How far can you go? Any pain, any pulling, any pinching, and then you come and you go to the other side, all right? So same thing. All right, and then come back up. So assess your motion, assess do you have any pain, do you have any pinching, any kind of thing like that. And the other thing is that you rotate. Your trunk rotates. And then it rotates this way. Now, most instruments will put us into some form of rotation. All right, most instruments will put us into some form of flexion. Okay, that's just sort of the nature of the beast. Few instruments will put us into extension. There are some, but more often you may go into extension as you're moving, but it's not a position that you're actually stationary in most of the time. And then some people will kind of be in a side bend position as well. So sometimes guitarists will kind of be side bending a little bit and they'll be rotating a little bit, okay? Flute, rotated to the left, okay? All right, so think about, again, what position is your spine, your trunk, going into as you're sitting at your instrument ready to play. But first assess your range of motion, and does it hurt anywhere? If you have back problems or anything like that, just make sure you check with your physician. If you've had surgery, here's my little disclaimer, right? Don't get hurt. The goal is to make sure that you're okay and that you're healthy. We don't want any injuries as you're trying to work through range of motion. So if you've had surgery, don't do this, check with your doctor, all right? Recent surgery, most of the time if you're pretty far out, you should be okay. So just go through your motions. So side bend, how far can you go? Side bend, how far can you go? Now for me, this way is hard because of all those years I spent smashing my left hip up into my pelvis from how I would stand and play my flute. All right. So I feel wicked stretch when I do this. And it's interesting because this is where most of, if I get crankiness, it's always on my left side, which is how I used to stand. I always used to jut my hip out and hold my flute this way. All right. So there was very little weight that was on my right lower extremity when I would play. It was usually always on my left. All right. So trunk rotation one way and trunk rotation the other way. And then you have flexion forward. And extension backwards. All right, so those are the 6 motions I want you to assess and see how they feel. And then sit down at your instrument and play and see what position am I in. All right, so I just like I said before, so for flute, I would always in a little bit of rotation. Okay, that's the position I would always be in. Occasionally I'd be forward, a little bit bent forward. So for, violin and viola, a lot of the times they are, again, turned to their left, all right? Percussionists tend to be forward, all right? Now the key when you are forward, when you are bending forward, there's something we like to call your sit bones, all right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the hip, actually. So your hip, your femur, that lovely hip that you have is like your shoulder. It's ball and socket. It has lots of motion and mobility, all right? Which is great, but requires a lot of stability as well, just like the shoulder. So the key with this too is that you want to make sure if you're standing when you practice, or if you're standing when you play, what position are you putting your lower extremity into? So we're going to just kind of cover briefly lower extremity, hips, knees, and that kind of thing. Are you hyperextending your knees and locking your knees when you play? all right, because that puts a lot of pressure and tension on your joints. So if you just do that, if you just stand up and you lock your knees, how does that feel? It doesn't feel great to me in the front of my knee, all right? But if you just relax, it feels much better. Now, if you try to bend a little bit, it doesn't necessarily feel as stable. When you're playing, are your feet really close together? Because again, that makes you a little bit more wobbly. That requires a lot more muscles to kind of engage, a lot more tension for you to be stable. Or your feet hip width apart, which widens your base of support, which gives you a little bit more stability. Do you play with one leg forward, one leg back? Do you put more weight on one side versus the other side? And do you stay in that position for a long period of time when you're actually standing and playing? Again, I keep going back to using me as an example because I had structural changes because of the position that I would always stay in, because I didn't know any better. I would always stay in that one position. I would always practice standing up. I never practiced sitting down. The only time I would play sitting down would be for performances. And depending on the performance, I would be standing up for some of them. So it really kind of, I spent a lot of time, a lot of hours in that position where I was leaning in, jutting my left hip out, all right? My left knee was kind of locked, all right? And everything over there kind of shortened and got shrunk down, all right? So pay attention to what position that you're in. If you're sitting down and you're playing, you want to make sure that you are actually bending from what you call your sit bones, okay? So this is going to be kind of a funny experiment, but if you take your hands and you poke your butt, all right, there's little bones. It's actually easier to do when you sit down. So if you sit down on your hands, you'll move around until you feel those bones in your butt, all right? Those are your sit bones, all right? They're called something else anatomically, but who cares? And that's the joy of anatomy. They have to rename everything. It's like a whole other freaking language. It's ridiculous. But you'll find those bones. Okay, when you sit up straight, you can feel them, all right? They're nice and straight. When you slouch, what happens when you slouch? You don't feel them anymore, all right? You feel them a little bit, but it's the edge of them. It's not the bottom of them. So then you want to sit back up again, and you come back up, and you can feel them again. Now, if you come too far forward, right, or if you kind of slunch over, you're off of them again, right? So your goal is when you're sitting, you're actually on your sit bones, because that's going to put you in a much better posture upright. And then, right, so if I come off my sit bones, I'm off of them now. See how my back kind of slunches? My head naturally comes forward, because as we change our position, our body always has to right itself, all right? The goal is that we always need to stay in some form of balance depending on what position we throw ourselves into. So as I come back, I lean back, my head naturally goes forward because I have to make up for that curve that I've created in my spine. Now when I come up onto my sit bones, right, I can feel those bones poking through onto my fingertips, all right? My head naturally goes more straight. So slouched, and then upright. All right. Now, when you're playing, if you're playing cello or double bass, a big instrument that you got to get your arms around, the key is, come off my hands and shoving my ring into my finger. The key is that you, again, don't want to like slouch like this when you're bringing your arms around, all right, around your instrument. You want to, again, make sure that you're upright and move forward from your hips, from your hinge, all right? So you're moving from a hinge rather than coming forward and curving your spine, all right? That hinge will keep you in a much better posture and keep your joints more aligned so that they'll have less wear and tear, all right? So again, that's the key, is that when you're sitting down, you want to make sure that you're sitting on those bones. So again, always just stick your hands under your butt and feel. Make sure you're on those bones so you really get a feel for what it's like. And then just practice what happens when I slouch. It's easy to slouch. It's sometimes hard to sit up straight because we don't have the muscles. We haven't built the muscles that we need to in order to hold ourselves up. That's part of the problem. We need to work on the muscles that actually do the jobs. So our core muscles, our spine muscles, all those guys need to actually be in really good alignment in order for us to be able to hold ourselves into a good posture, all right? Because as we get older, we sort of start getting lazier and lazier, and it's easier to just sort of relax, all right? So watch those positions and see kind of where you are at. Now, guitarists are gonna hate me right now. Are any guitarists out there? So, first let me show you this picture before I go on to the whole, because then it'll make even more sense. So this picture I really like because it shows the spine. I'm going to try not to have, oh, look at that. I didn't say go forward, go backwards there, my friend. Ugh. The joy of slide presentations. I didn't even push a button. Okay, so here we have the spine in nice normal alignment. Okay, now look what happens over here. All right, so when you raise your shoulder up, look at how it affects your spine, right? So if you're hiking your shoulder up, this is one thing that we tend to do as well when we're stressed. We go into that lovely shoulder hike position. It changes the alignment of your spine, okay? Same thing with our arm up, changes the alignment of our spine, right? That third picture is a high hip. So that was me. All right, mine was much higher though. I had a much higher hip. Again, it changes the alignment of your spine. All right, that fourth one is the head tilt. So violinists, violists, anybody moving their head, guitarists, to play, you put yourself in that position for long periods of time and don't do anything to balance the muscles and don't do anything to get out of those deforming positions that you put yourself into for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. Eventually your joints and your tissues are going to start screaming at you at some point in time. So it's always better to try to prevent that in the first place. Now, you have to go into certain positions when you are playing, but the key is to be as balanced as you possibly can be when you go into those positions and then get out of them as much as you can. And then that last picture over there is just a really, really, really bad scoliosis. Really bad scoliosis. So, but you can see as you change your body position how your spine changes, and just think about the hours that you put yourself in your instrument, assess what position your spine is in, and just realize that you're asking a lot of it to stay in that position for the hours along the day that you play. Okay? So, that's that picture, which I thought was interesting. So I'm going to tell you, hey Laura, how are you? I'm going to tell you a little story about a patient that I just had. I've seen her a few times, but she is a fairly new violinist. This is more of a fun thing for her. So it doesn't, as musicians, there's all different levels of musicians. There's people, that are super high professional level, and then there are people that are just starting, and then they love it no matter what, all right? So for me, I was unfortunately of the mindset that it was an either all or nothing kind of thing for me. So when I was injured, it was really super devastating. I was like, yeah, if I can't be professional, I don't want to do it. That was my mindset, which was really it was very short-sighted. But anyways, so there's people all along the way that they love music and they love playing music. So this woman is a new violinist, and she was having a really hard time getting into third position and playing her G string on her violin. And it was a matter of she just couldn't get her arm up. She was getting into a really funky position. So what we realized the other day when she was here, it was all trunk. It was all coming from her trunk. What she was doing is she was extending her back, twisting her arm, and twisting her back and coming this way. And what it was doing, it was completely putting her in a disadvantage. So everything was all funky over here because she was trying so hard to get into the position that she needed to get into. So sometimes we can just start this little bit of a habit and not even realize it because we're trying so hard. We want it to work so badly. And then we start this habit and then we can't quite get out of it. So we just reversed engineered her, all right? And I took her back and had her start straight, had her hold her instrument, had her bend a little bit forward because she was going to an extension. So I had her come a little bit forward, which was exaggerated. You're not going to be in that position when you play. Bring her instrument up, keep her head straight, put her instrument on her body, And then she just would turn ever so slightly, and then she was able to play, and she was able to hit the G string. She was able to get into third position. She was able to hit everywhere that she needed to do, and her bow arm was fine, because that was the other thing that she was struggling with, is that she was trying to reach around because she was this way, and then she's trying to reach around to use her bow arm, and she couldn't, right? And it all actually started from the trunk. As soon as we fixed that, she could play. And it was amazing. It was so amazing. It was great. But that just shows you that sometimes we don't even realize that what we're doing, and that's a posture that was really preventing her from playing, and she really wanted to play. So it doesn't matter, like, if you're a virtuoso, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner. You want to be set up at your instrument so that you can play and do what you love. All right, that's the most important thing. So, and we were able to get her. I have not found a chin rest that I love for violinists and violists. Because a lot of them have this big lip that they have to kind of come up and over. So we were able to get her shoulder rest high enough so that she didn't have to even use a chin rest. Like, she was in, so she went from this position and this position and like this position to being pretty much straight, a little bit of a turn, and no neck flexion. She was in a wonderful position, just by tweaking a few little things. So it's just a great example of how, if you just kind of switch things around and know your anatomy, know your body, figure out how things are moving, how things are supposed to move, how you can fix yourself at your instrument. So now she's set up in a better position where hopefully she won't have pain. She was having a lot of wrist pain. That's what brought her to see me in the first place. So it's, it's one of those things, we were able to get rid of her wrist pain, and then we were able to put her in an even better position. So she's not all tweaked and contorted, okay? Because that's not what you want. So the key is to really find the overall happy positions that you can for the joints. So going back to hip and lower extremity quick, I kind of went off on a tangent with that. But guitar players, you're going to start hating me. And it's okay. I'm okay with that. Because I'm okay with this as long as you guys do stuff to get out of it. So there's the big debacle and debate over guitar support versus footrest. Okay? I personally, from a therapeutic standpoint, do not like the footrest. Okay? And Laura, I know you're a therapist. How are you? So the problem with the footrest is that it hip hikes you, puts your hip into a lot of flexion, all right? It also twists your spine, okay? And it can cause problems later on down the line. Now, I know a lot of guitarists love the footrest. They love the footrest, right? And it's okay. So in a perfect world, if you wanna make me happy, you use the guitar support, which is a phenomenal thing that they have now. It's magnetic. It hooks right onto the instrument, and it's adjustable in height, and it can put you into this position without your hip being all the way hiked up, which is wonderful, right? If you guys have not used it, or if you have not seen it, I would highly recommend checking it out. I can find the link for it. But it's held on with magnets. They put little magnets on the inside of the guitar, and then it just hooks into that area. So it's first a matter of finding a spot where it can actually tweak, so it's actually in the right position for you before you have those magnets actually installed in there. But the problem with this position is, well, there's a lot of problems with it, but it can cause tightness in the hip, all right? It can overstretch the areas in the back. It can cause low back problems later on down the road. So again, it's not the best ergonomic body mechanic position for the instrument. But if you're going to use it, if you're going to use the footrest, which I know a lot of people use the footrest, and people have used the footrest for years and years and years and years, and some people are lucky they don't have problems. But it is kind of, if you look at it from a therapeutic standpoint, from an anatomical standpoint, from a body mechanic standpoint, it is not the best thing to use. So don't hate on me. Don't hate on me. I know some people love it, and that's okay. But if you're going to use it, you have to make sure that you're doing stretches and exercises to get yourself out of the pattern that it puts you in. That's the key. That is the key. Okay? Because again, there's this lovely thing called, we call it in the therapy world, Total end range time. I think I might have mentioned it in one of my last talks, but it is there's a bunch of scientific studies on it, and it's all about tissues and how if you stretch a tissue for a long period of time, or shrink a tissue, say, i.e. a cast. So if you, let's just take the stretching of a tissue. If you take a tissue and you stretch it for a long period of time, over a small stretch, long duration, all right, you will actually get tissue elongation. So it's kind of like a rubber band. When you take a rubber band, you pull it apart, it goes back to its normal stage because you're only pulling it for a second. You take that rubber band, you put it around a bag of chips, you forget about the bag of chips, and then you go back to, oh God, I found these chips. And you go to eat the chips and the rubber band, you go to move the rubber band and it kind of breaks off, or you take it off and it's twice the size as it used to be because you've overstretched those fibers, okay? Not overstretched, but if it breaks, I guess you've overstretched it, but you stretched out and elongated those tissues, okay? So when you put yourself into a position for a long period of time, you are overstretching certain positions and tissues and kind of contracting other ones. So it's like with the whole contraction thing, it's like putting yourself into a cast. You put yourself into a cast for 2 weeks, you come out and you're already stiff, unless you're 14 or 15, then you come out and you're probably fine. But if you put yourself into a cast and you immobilize yourself and you don't move into certain positions, you're telling your body, I don't need to move into these positions. So your body's going to do a great job and it's going to adapt and say, okay, fine. And it's going to get tight. So in my case, my hip got tight. So whenever I try to stretch in the other direction, I feel a huge stretch because those muscle tendon units and that capsule tightened, all right, from the hours and hours and hours a day that I put myself into that position. So if I had known back then, I wouldn't, have done that. I would have altered my position, all right, I would have altered my technique at my instrument from other different perspectives as well, but I would have totally changed the way I was standing all the time, right? It would have been hard. Would it have been hard? Yes. Did I not have problems for a really long time? Yeah, but eventually it caught up with me and it bit me in the ass, all right? So I don't want that for you guys. I don't want anything to come up and bite you in the butt. Just because you don't have problems now doesn't mean that later on that you may not. You may not. I don't have a crystal ball. But the bottom line, when you look at things from an anatomy standpoint, from a therapy standpoint, from a tissue standpoint, and you look at what you're requesting your bodies to do, the likelihood is that you will have some form of tissue changes from the positions that you put yourself in. So it's really important to take care of yourself. Put yourself into the best possible position that you can, and when you can't, you need to work out of those positions and balance those muscles, because again, you are an athlete. You are totally an athlete, and you have to really start thinking of yourself that way. And we need to start talking more about these injuries and what happens so that we can prevent them and know that it's normal and it's okay. If musicians get injured, it's okay. There's ways around it. It's not the end, and you can still play. The worst thing I think is to tell patients to rest, okay? Really, I think that there's always a way to find a way to play at your instrument in some way, shape, and or form. It may not be 100% the way that you want if you're dealing with an injury, but there's always a way to be at your instrument, unless you're in a cast or unless you had a surgery and the precautions don't allow you to do that. So that is super, super important, okay? So assess your trunk position, assess your standing position if you stand when you practice, assess your sitting position. Get on your sit bones, stick your hands under your butt on that chair and feel those bones, okay? You gotta poke around a little bit so that you can feel those bones. Can't quite show you on here because the chair is a little bit low, but let's see if I can lower it down. All right, so I'm gonna grab my ass right now. I stick my hands on my butt, sit down on the chair. Whoop. All right, I find those bones. You got to kind of move around a little bit. If you have extra padding like I do, you got to move around a little bit. Find those bones and then move forward and then back. Okay? You can do it in the privacy of your own home. Nobody has to see. Right now, I don't know how many people are watching me sit on my ass, but my fingers, but sorry. So just assess that. And then just realize that there are happy positions for every single joint, okay? And remember the postural alignment, you know, that is that happiest position for our spine, okay? Our shoulders have happy positions, our thumbs have happy positions, and just take your, you know, I gave examples throughout each of the lessons in terms of where things kind of feel the happiest, that kind of thing. And I know this is all technical stuff, you know, in terms of what kind of range of motion do you have and that stuff. So once you've assessed your entire body and all the joints that we've gone through and kind of looked at what position you are at your instrument and what are you doing, is there any way that you can sort of tweak it? Is there any, you know, make sure that you're getting in and out of positions and not staying in one position for too long. I then want you to start thinking about the energy that you approach your instrument at, okay? So everything we do is energy. Everything. The way that we play comes across in a certain energy, right? You're trying to portray a certain mood. Stress in our life creates energy that comes inside of us and gets stuck, and it can prevent things. It can cause tissue tightness, all right? And stress alone can cause, you know, injuries in and of themselves. I had a friend who's a PT, and when she was in PT school, she developed a stutter. As soon as she finished PT school, her stutter went away, all right? Stress, all right? Stress does bad things to us, all right? So we want to look at what kind of stuff is going on in our lives, what kinds of stresses that are happening, and then how do we take those stresses as we sit down at our instrument, all right? Because if we are stressed, that is going to come out when we're actually sitting down in our tissues, okay? So what's the energy that you're approaching your instrument at? Is it like totally calm and cool? Or are you like, oh my God, I'm going to kill somebody today? That kind of thing. So think about that, and always, again, try to ground yourself, try to create the best environment that you can when you're actually playing. And that's a whole nother topic, the environment in which we play. So we're not going to go too far into that at all today. But I want you to start thinking about the energy of how you're playing and the positions that you're using and the energy in your muscles and your joints when you're actually playing, all right? So we have one more day of this challenge, and I'll be back on Thursday. Thursday, I'll be back. Just to kind of recap everything, answer any questions. So if you guys have any questions, please comment them. If you have anything going on, please feel free to share. This is a safe place. There will be no judgment. There cannot be any judgment. We're here to help each other. Lots of people have different things that work for them. I want to hear those things. I want to hear what works for you. I want to hear what you've been doing. Talk about all those different things. We can all learn. And I think it's really important to share and, you know, not be afraid if you have an injury to bring it up, because that's the only way you're going to get help is if you bring it up. So do not suffer in silence if you have an injury. And be proactive. God, if I had been proactive, if I had known all the things now, I'd probably still be playing. So, you know, just keep that in mind. It's really important. It's really important. So at the end of this, I'm putting together kind of like a little package for you guys. If anybody wants to kind of get a little bit more detailed look at how they're playing, I'm going to do a little offer for you guys. It'll be super discounted on Thursday. I'm still trying to figure that out. But if you want me to assess you and that kind of thing, we're going to figure out a couple ways that we can maybe work together in that respect. So if anybody has questions, comment below, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Monday, and I will talk to you soon.